As a fan of Big Brother, it's always been a dream to be on the show and compete for the $500,000 prize. But as someone who just recently came of age to apply, it's never been in the cards for me before now. But I've always loved the hype surrounding the release of the cast list each season, knowing that 16 fans of the show are about to live out some of their lifelong dreams. And wait a second, who's this? Your favorite season is Big Brother 16? Your favorite player is Jeff Schroeder? You're not a fan of the show, you're a faker. Hello everyone, welcome to this video. Today, we're going to be looking into the successes, the failures, and the overall history of recruits on Big Brother. For those who don't know, recruits are people that didn't initially apply to be on the show, but were found by someone in the casting department and were either recommended by them to look into applying to the show, or were fast-forwarded through the process to either the semifinal stage or something similar to that. Recruits can be found anywhere. Hayden Moss was found on a plane, Becky from season 17 was found on Tinder, and for a little bit of a Survivor shoutout, Johnny Fairplay was found at a gas station. Every season has recruits, and I'll be the first to admit that for a while, it always made me a little angry that so many people that didn't even know the show were getting these casting spots when they could be going to people who actually love the game. But as I've grown older, I've realized that maybe, just maybe, recruits do have a place on the show. But I'm not convinced yet. So let's take a look through the history of the show and see which recruits have found success and which recruits have found themselves walking right out the front door to go talk to Julie.
We have a lot to discuss.
Okay, fine.
A week ago tonight,
Yeah.
your alliance imploded.
Was that what it was? Implosion?
Yeah, just
Okay.
a little one.
All right.
When it comes to every season pre-All-Stars, there's almost nothing to help determine who was recruited, or what the recruitment process was even like in the early days. Drew Daniel, the winner of Big Brother 5, is speculated to have been recruited for the show, but I have no proof of it. The individual who lost to Drew in the final two, Cowboy, was an applicant for the show. However, production found out that he didn't know who his dad was, and CBS was able to track down and find his father, and through that found Nokomis and recruited her for Big Brother 5 to be a part of the Project DNA twist for the season. This isn't 100% confirmed to be true, but I wanted to mention it. For the following season, Big Brother 6, I could only find concrete evidence for one recruit, James Ryan. He was found on his MySpace page because they liked his modeling profile picture. So let's focus on this for pre-All-Stars recruitment. As far as we know, of the few recruits we have some evidence on, production was able to produce a winner in Drew, a top-tier strategist in Nokomis, and a fan-favorite competition beast in James. Not bad at all, and it marks the early day of recruits as quite a big success. They were all game players and left a big mark on their respective seasons. Unfortunately, I really couldn't find anything else for this era of Big Brother, but as we move on towards the modern day seasons, it's a lot more well-known who was recruited and who wasn't. Side note, I need to just say that unless a house guest goes out and says that they were recruited, it's really hard to find 100% evidence. So if I miss somebody, or if I say that there's someone that's a recruit but they really weren't, I apologize. I'm just going based off of the sources that I've found. So bear with me. Let's get back to it though. Big Brother 8. Yeah, the recruits this season didn't necessarily scream greatest of all time. We were given 4. Carol, Mike, Nick, and Jen Johnson, with the first 3 being booted before the jury phase, with one of them being the first boot in Carol. But we did get Jen Johnson, who is without a doubt some great comic relief for the season and managed to win a couple competitions as well. This is the start of an era where we see some of the season's recruits perform absolutely awful and get evicted from the house very early on. I'd classify the recruits as a failure, except for Jen Johnson, who gets a pass for being a fantastic character.
It's horrible.
Are you crying?
It's so bad.
Big Brother 9 had a lot of recruits. Jacob, Neil, Jen, Amanda, Alex, Matt, Natalie, Sheila, and Ryan. Please don't make me talk a lot about Big Brother 9. The pre-jury boots outside of Alex were what we may consider to be bottom tier players. And while I think like 6 of the 9 recruits were bust, both Sheila and Ryan showed potential and both were able to make it to the final 3, giving a small spark of hope to all the recruit lovers out there. But for the most part, in these past 2 seasons, the recruits have been an overall failure and have been unable to produce more than a couple memorable players. Big Brother 10 only gave us 4 recruits: Steven, Jesse, Keisha, and Memphis. Interesting that 3 out of the 4 recruits have returned for another season, with Dan being the only player to return from Big Brother 10 and not be a recruit. Steven, unfortunately, was just outmaneuvered by Dan and was evicted second, but Jesse was a huge part of the pre-jury phase. Keisha was an absolute golden find by production, and Memphis was quite the fiery fella this season. Both Keisha and Memphis made it to the Final Four, with Keisha becoming America's favorite and Memphis taking home $50,000 for second place. Outside of Steven, who I don't even think was unlikable, I think the recruits were quite successful. The producers even gave America the choice of which recruit they liked the least between Jesse and Memphis, and were nice enough to let us decide who goes home. Unfortunately, they forgot to mention that they'd both return for a later season. Silly production.
Uh-huh. You don't say. That's all I need to hear. Oh, God! One of my naps finally paid off.
In Big Brother 11, I don't think it comes to anyone's surprise when I tell you that Jeff and Jordan were both recruits. But for the first time, as far as we know, given actual evidence, production produced their first recruit winner in Jordan. And on top of that, the casual audience was just in love with Jeff, who took home America's favorite.
The $25,000. Why do you think America fell in love with you?
Good editing, I think. I don't know.
Uh-huh. You don't say.
And even on top of that, Russell, one of the most explosive players of the season, was also a recruit. So I genuinely say that those three were successful, both TV-wise and game-wise, kinda. But there were, of course, some flops. The first and second boots in Brayden and Laura were recruits, as well as Lydia, who I can't say contributed the most that season. But I'd say three of the biggest characters of the season were all recruits and showed that recruits really can make an impact. Now, I'm not saying that Jeff and Jordan outplayed the rest of the cast, but they did take home the win and a round-trip ticket back for season 13.
You're angry at yourself, bro, not
Got
me.
you. No, Jeff, I've actually never been angry. Never been angry. I just wanna hug you, Jeff.
Take 5 minutes to yourself, think of a good one, and then I'll be sitting here and then come back with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And we'll all
maybe I can
test
go
it.
look up Technotronic, see if it's a word.
In Big Brother 12, we had 6 recruits. Monet, the second boot, didn't add much except for making fun of all of the houseguests with Brittany. Similarly, Kristen was recruited, but sort of just fought with Rachel, hooked up with Hayden, and was evicted pre-jury. The last 4 recruits were all very prominent players, though. Brendan and Rachel were both recruited, and come on, you don't need me to tell you about them. An absolute power duo that aren't necessarily the greatest at the game, but are damn good at the competitions, and they left quite a mark on this season and the following season. The last 2 recruits of the season were actually the final 2 in Lane and Hayden, 2 key members of the Big Alliance that season in the Brigade. This is the first and only time the final 2 has consisted of 2 recruits playing for the first time, and both were quite good at the game, especially Hayden. Hayden, as you can tell by his placement on the thumbnail, is who I believe to be in the top tier of recruits to play the game. I think this is probably the most successful batch of recruits the show has brought in, as they produced 2 winners, a runner-up, a power couple, and like 100 competition wins.
I think that we're smart enough to not do it around you.
Why?
Because
you're so smart, Kristen?
Yeah,
Because
I
you have
am.
a fashion degree?
Yeah.
And you are because you have a chemistry degree? String a sentence together without using the word like, will you?
In Big Brother 13, 5 of the 8 new players were recruits. And to nobody's surprise, every member of the Regulators was a recruit. Yep, you heard it here. Keith, Cassie, Dominic, and Luan were all recruited. The only other recruit was Portia, who we saw actually picked up the game quite well and was 1 vote away from winning the whole thing. Returnees are kind of weird to classify as recruits when they're playing for the second time, but as we mentioned before, Rachel was a recruit and she eventually won a season, so she falls into a weird limbo category. But let's look at this for a second. From Big Brother 9 to Big Brother 13, a span of 5 seasons, 7 out of the 10 players sitting at the end in the final 2 chairs were recruits, with only Adam, Dan, and Natalie applying for the show. Even with a lot of the recruits making up at least half, if not the majority, of pre-jury boots in each season from Big Brother 8 to Big Brother 13, we saw a lot of recruits find success, with 3 straight winners being initially recruited to the show, and every runner-up aside from Danny Donato in Big Brother 8 and Natalie in Big Brother 11 being a recruit. So up to this point, we have seen a healthier distribution of success and failures from the recruits. However, from this point forward, we would never see a recruit win a mainline season of the show again, with one exception that we'll get to later. In Big Brother 14, as far as we know, each returnee was an applicant, so we don't need to touch upon them. However, 7 out of the 12 new players were recruited, which is quite a large number. Kara, Willie Hance, who definitely had knowledge of the game since his brother is Russell Hance, JoJo, Ashley, Jen, Shane, and Danielle were all recruited. Those first 4 names had no real impact and were all taken out early. Gen City wasn't the greatest player, but at least was willing to make moves, like using the veto on Dan in an attempt to team up with him. Shane was a comp beast with a decent strategic mind on his shoulders, and more than likely wins the season, if not for the brilliance of Dan getting Danielle to use the veto on him at Final Four. And that brings us to Danielle, who apparently is an absolute nut job, but was able to make it to third place. Even with Shane and Danielle on the list of recruits, the recruits for the most part were overshadowed by the returnees and applicants of Big Brother 14.
Oh my gosh, I just pulled this off. I am so excited. I get to keep my boys safe. Dan, Shane, and I are going to the final 3, and I hold all the power once again.
Shane, we did it.
You did it. You did it.
So Shane, I'm sorry I have to evict you.
Now, we get to Big Brother 15, and I could be wrong since I've seen a couple of contradicting sources, but from what I've been able to conclude, Big Brother 15 has a record-breaking number of recruits. Just not the record you may be thinking of. There were only 2 recruits this season, the lowest ever for any season of Big Brother. David Gurton and Caitlin Barnaby. Yeah, I'm surprised too that there were only 2, especially when we had players like Jeremy, Gina Marie, and so on. But yeah, I just need to emphasize again that this information could be wrong. Both recruits were taken out pre-jury and left no positive impact on the season. Also, have you noticed a pattern yet? Every season that we've talked about so far, either the first boot, the second boot, or both have been recruited. Big Brother 16 had a split 50-50 with applicants and recruits. The first 4 boots of the season were all recruited, as well as Hayden Voss and all of the final 4 except for Derek, being Caleb, Victoria, and Cody. It's certainly an interesting set of players. 4 players that burnt out fast and were evicted, a non-entity in Hayden, all brain but little bronze with Caleb, the queen of the block in Victoria, and then one of the best players of all time in Cody. The detonators were made up of all applicants and Cody, so even though half the recruits ended up placing well, Cody was really the only solid player of the bunch. But great gameplay isn't everything, because even though Devin was out third, it was marvelous watching him spiral in the early game.
Disrespectful way. You're over here talking
That's
to
not what
Amber.
half of the house is saying.
Hey, look, this is the thing. There's no
that's
more
what you wanna
lines. Look,
do.
there's no more lines.
Okay.
There's no more lines. We're done.
Okay, cool.
Like, this is so much coming at me.
Devin is revealing the golden bomb squad to me, but he's just forcing me to be in it. He says, hey, like, you know, we have the numbers, join or die.
Now, moving on to Big Brother 17, this season brought us another 8 recruits. Jeff and Jackie were recruited from The Amazing Race, but I don't want to qualify them for this because they were brought from another show. Jace, Clay, Becky, Meg, and Liz and Julia were all recruited. We see yet another first boot with Jace, but I feel that the other recruits all brought something to the season. Clay was a huge piece in the early game. Becky had a reasonable head on her shoulders. Meg may not have been the greatest player, but brought a lot with her personality. And the twins were major factors in the season as a whole due to their Oz Twins alliance, and we saw Liz make it to the final 2 and get a few votes at the end. So although the recruits weren't the greatest players of all time, I think there were very few flops this season, and some were able to see quite a bit of success.
Oh. Of course you have my word. Yeah. Girlfriend.
Vanessa, you're going home.
There were 5 recruits for Big Brother 18 as far as I'm aware. Jose was a brilliant disaster to watch, and obviously had not really seen the show before. Surprisingly, the final 4 new players of the season were the other 4 recruits. None of Natalie, Victor, Corey, or Paul applied to be on the show. Natalie was definitely a good choice for recruitment and did well enough. Victor, although evicted 3 times, was a competition beast, wasn't afraid to take big moves, and won AFP. Corey, although boring, was actually quite good at the game and had a really good shot of winning had he made it past the final 4. I'll quickly just say before we move forward that the group of recruits for Big Brother 18 actually ended up being very successful and arguably played better than most of the other players on the season.
Oh, doghouse for sure.
That was the meanest thing that you could have said to me.
It was a joke, Nicole.
I don't care.
Are you serious? Are you kidding?
No, I'm dead serious.
Nicole.
What?
It was a joke.
I don't care. Honestly, don't want to talk to you right now.
Seriously, stop saying that.
No, I don't. You really, that hurt my feelings.
Now, back to the last person, Paul. Paul played absolutely crazy during Big Brother 18, but was so good at surviving, winning competitions, and making deals all the way up until they were sitting in the final 2, 1 vote shy of taking it all. While we're at it, we can quickly talk about how Paul didn't even watch Big Brother 18, came back for Big Brother 19, and played the most dominating game of all time. This is where Paul's recruitment status really shows, though. Had they known the show a bit better, maybe they would have known to manage the jury even just the slightest amount in Big Brother 19, and it showed that no matter how good you are, if you don't understand every facet of the game, it could end up becoming your downfall.
Congratulations, Josh. You are the winner of Big Brother. Paul and Josh.
Now, let's move on to Big Brother 19. The recruits were just Dominique, Elena, Christmas, bleh. Jason was really the only one that I feel picked up the game quickly and effectively. Even though Christmas made it further, she wasn't going to win in the end, whereas I do believe Jason had a really good shot at beating most people if he made it to the final 2 chairs. Both Jessica and Jillian were possibly recruited, but I'm not entirely sure. Regardless though, the recruits were not the greatest this season.
Jillian, you are evicted from the Big Brother house.
Getting close to the end here, Big Brother 20 had quite the group of recruits, all with varying levels of success. Some of the recruits brought a lot to the table entertainment-wise, but not a lot game-wise, such as Caitlin, Bailey, and Haley. They added a lot to the show though, so that doesn't make them bad. Sam was a recruit, and she had no idea how the game worked, and was also seemingly losing her mind the further in the season she got. But we did get 2 great players that both surprised me. Brett certainly exuded recruit vibes in the beginning, but he really picked up the game and was really good at things like guerrilla warfare, lying, and he knew when he needed to turn on his alliance, even if he wasn't able to pull it off. But possibly the greatest recruited player we've ever seen is JC. He ran circles around the Fate side of the house, and he grasped the game exceptionally well and exceptionally fast for someone who had never seen the show before. He was one of the best new players we have seen in a long time, but unfortunately for him, he played in the season with Tyler, who played just a bit better and therefore overshadowed a lot of JC's gameplay greatness. To be fair though, JC did make it to the final 3 and beats both Casey and Tyler in a final 2, so he was a really successful recruited player.
Girlfriend wasn't enough, honestly.
Shut up.
Big Brother 21 had a handful of recruits. David, Bella, Jack, and I have to assume Sis were all recruits. None of them were good at the game, especially all of them. I can't decide who is worse. David really showed promising signs of understanding the dynamics of the house, but then showed on his return in All-Stars that what we saw was not what we got. I like David though, and was happy to see him back.
Say, what's up? Did you?
No, I didn't. Come on, bro. What are you doing?
Did you use the power on me? Did you?
No.
You're not fooling me. I don't think you're fooling anybody in this house.
And obviously, I don't need to explain anything for Bella, Jack, and Anal Lice. The other 2 players, though, Kat and Holly, were both recruited from Instagram, and I will be the first person to say that I initially was not happy seeing Kat on the cast list. I thought she was just going to be there for the hookups, wouldn't be entertaining, and was just a waste of a casting spot. But no, Kat is quite possibly the best case scenario when it comes to recruits. She was fun, played hard, was very likable, and I wish we got to see more of her. Out of all the recruits, though, I feel that Holly was the best game player. But even still, once it got down to the final 6 of Big Brother 21, I really don't think she had a shot against anyone left at that point, which is a shame because she was in such a good position pre-jury. She did end up taking home the $50K though, which is a nice little payday. Big Brother 22, since it was an All-Stars, I'm not really going to talk about it because they've all played before, but I'm going to mention that the first boot in Keisha was initially a recruit, and Cody, the winner, was also a recruit, the first player that was initially a recruit to win the game since Rachel back in season 13.
He was awesome. He was awesome. Do we need a mask or no?
And that's all the seasons I have information on. I've always been on the side of casting players that are actual fans of the show and want to be there, but realistically, think about all the great moments we miss out on if there were no recruits. Jen Johnson crying over her headshot, Keisha's birthday, Rockstar's daughter's birthday, Floater's Grab a Life Fest, and by proxy, the gif of Alyssa Slater that I swear has to be the most used gif in existence. We also missed out on some great game players like Paul and Cody, who, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can live without, but as boring as the gameplay might be during the time, I love looking back and seeing the players that absolutely dominated the game and watching them become some of the greats. There's a lot of ups and downs that come with recruits. I mentioned it about halfway through the video, but if you didn't notice it, from Big Brother 8 to current day, the first or second boot of each season has been a recruit. But there's also been a lot of recruits that have made it far and really impacted the game. 9 of the last 16 runners-up have been recruits, and at least 4 winners, maybe even more depending on early Big Brother, were also initially recruited. Even in terms of who the audience likes, there have been 4 AFPs awarded to recruits, although 2 of them were for Jeff, so yeah. We've seen a lot of failures from recruits, which most fans will point to when they get angry about them, but we've also seen a lot of successes. Recruits bring a lot more to the show than you'd think, because if we had a season with 16 fans of the show, we'd start the game off with a 16-person super alliance, and that would be boring as hell. Recruits don't always know how to play the game, and that's exactly why they're needed. Sometimes they bring their own spin on things, and for the most part, they always bring a little something. But production, please, 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 stop showing the new players Big Brother 16 and Sequester. It always makes them want to form a huge alliance in the beginning, and that's boring and nobody wants it. Just show them Big Brother 10, Big Brother 14, and if you have to show them a modern season, either 17 or 20. I'm writing this before season 23 starts, but right off the bat, I think that Travis, Whitney, Brittany, and maybe Christian are recruits. Also, Christy was, but she's no longer on the season, unfortunately. But let's try to take it easy on them. They're basically learning as they go, and who knows, maybe they'll really surprise us. It's happened before.
Ouchie. I'd say, what the deal, boss? I thought we loved some mamas up in here getting it done. So what the deal?
Thank you for watching and getting to this point. We just hit 1,000 subscribers, and I am beyond grateful. You honestly all rock. I didn't think I'd ever get here, so to see that big-ass number on my profile page really makes me smile. If you enjoyed it, let me know, but I think you all earned a break, so no need to subscribe today. Maybe next time, though.
Happy birthday to you. Anybody want cake?